Good morning, welcome to Hollywood and West Napa. I am your host for the next hour, Kat Smith, and we have our first guest on the line. Good morning, caller. You're live on KSVY. Is this Steve?
This is Steve, yes.
Welcome to
morning.
the show. And listeners, we're talking to Steve Latshaw, the writer and director of a new film, Return of the Killer Shrews. And it just released on video on demand. So it's on iTunes, and Amazon is coming up next.
Yes, iTunes exclusively until November 9th, and then November 9th it goes to Amazon and Google as well.
Well, I saw a quote. Somebody said that your film is a reality show with a body count.
That's actually a line in the movie. And the script, by the way, was written actually by James Best, the star of the film, and Pat Moran and myself. So
okay.
Those James and Pat did the heavy lifting, and I helped.
And so he's James Best is returning as the same character as the 1959 character that was a horror B-movie double feature, Attack of the Killer Shrews.
Yes, the original Killer Shrews went out with its co-feature was a movie called Giant Gila Monster, and both of those movies were shot over the course of 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
In Texas. And Jimmy had done the first one as a favor to director Sam Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
Sam did not direct Killer Shrews, but a friend of his, Ken Curtis, was producing it, and so Jimmy went down there to be the nominal star for that film. And I met James Best in 1989 and immediately started talking to him about doing a sequel to it, and he thought I was crazy for about the first 5 years. Then we become friends, and then we spent about 15 years working on various script ideas before we finally got to do it.
Oh, amazing. So can you give us a little bit of the story of the original film and a little bit of your story?
Well, the original, James Best and his first mate are shipping cargo to this island off the coast of Texas. On this island are some scientists who are researching doing some biological experiments on shrews and managed to make them bigger, so big that they get loose and start to devour everything and everyone on the island. And Best and his first mate get trapped on the island, and it's about everybody trying to escape.
Mm-hmm.
Our film, set approximately 50 years later, Best's character, Thorne Sherman, needs money, and he and his new first mate have accepted a job to carry cash and supplies and some people back to the same island to help supply a reality TV show that's shooting on the island.
And what could go wrong there?
Yes, well, that's the thing. Thorne Sherman is not too happy about having to do this to begin with, and of course, once they get there, they find all sorts of horrible things still going on, and one particular character from the first film that's still on the island.
So what exactly is a shrew?
It's a little furry rodent, as I recall. It's in the original movie, they actually used coon hunting dogs, and put fake fur and fangs on them.
Oh, my goodness.
Those were the shrews in the original film. James, when we talked about this, Jimmy told me that there's a scene in the original where he's chased by the shrews, and the way they got the coon dogs to chase him is they had a truck up ahead that was dragging a cage that had raccoons in it.
Oh, my gosh.
And then Jimmy is behind the truck, and then the dogs are behind Jimmy, and so they're sniffing and they're smelling the raccoons, and so that's why they're chasing Jimmy, and he told me it scared the heck out of him. So.
Oh, for sure. The things we do for art.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I noticed right away from the trailer was that the beach scenes are really pretty. Where did you film those?
The beach scenes. Well, when they land the boat, that was actually at Marina del Rey, and there's a lot of boat slips and resort buildings and all kinds of things down there, and so our CGI team sort of took all that out and replaced it with sort of jungle settings so we could sell that part of it. As far as the actual jungle setting and where the sand and all the streams are, That's actually a beautiful little oasis out in the middle of Agua Dulce, California. It's out in the middle of the desert, but there's a creek there, and there's wonderful jungles and sand, and it was a beautiful setting in the middle of the desert where you wouldn't expect it. And that place also had a building that looked almost identical to the original building in the first Killer Shrews movie. So,
how lucky!
So we were able to recreate the exterior and interior sets pretty closely to the original film, which was sort of deja vu for James Best. The first day he walked on the set, it was like he had never left.
Right. And you'd mentioned that James Best had done it originally as a favor, and this time he was very much involved. What was his experience on the set?
This time? It was a great time because he and another actor, David Browning, who plays Nevis in the film, kept the cast and crew in stitches. I mean, Jimmy would be doing Roscoe P. Coltrane from the Dukes of Hazzard. He would be telling stories. He and John Schneider would sit around and tell stories. Everybody on set were Dukes of Hazzard fans. Jimmy and David would do comedy routines. They would do songs together. Jimmy and I both imitate W.C. Fields, so we did dueling W.C. Fields. I mean, it was just a fun time. It was the most fun I've ever had on a film set.
That's awesome.
30 years. And Jimmy loved it. I mean, he wanted to make this film a comedy, which is what it is. It's not a straight horror film. It's a send up of the Sci-Fi Channel bad CGI movies.
Right.
And it's a sort of a loving tribute to the old drive-in schlock movies that we used to love.
Well, that leads me to another question, because I read somewhere that the original release of your film was a few years ago, and it was treated by the marketing team of your distributor as just a straightforward horror film. And so,
yes.
How did that hurt your release of the film?
In some ways, it really didn't. American World Pictures handled it originally, and we told them, you have to sell this as a comedy. I mean, it's got a guy in a goat suit, for God's sake. And I said, if you sell this as a straight horror film, it's not going to do well. And they said, we know how to do this, kid. We know what we're doing. So they sold it as a straight horror film. They did a very slick artwork, key art for it that looked slick, but it sold it as a straight horror film and bared very little resemblance to the film itself. And they sold some DVD territories overseas, not a lot of them. And after 18 months, we got the rights to the film back, and we just said, this film wasn't marketed correctly. We're going to sit on it for a while. We did get a DVD release in the United States, a wonderful DVD release from a company called Retro Media, who put out a DVD that had all kinds of extras on it. They were very nice to us, and it sold a few thousand copies domestically, but it was a limited release, and we just decided to sit on everything else. We still owned All TV. We still owned all of the different streaming platforms and quite a few other territories overseas, and we thought, we're just going to sit on this till we can figure out a way for the audience to know what this film is and market it correctly, and that opportunity came up this year. So we're very excited that we finally get to show it for what it is. Yeah.
And I also had a thought, because it was originally a double feature kind of drive-in movie type thing, have you thought about doing any drive-in theater showings?
We'd love to. It's a great, that would be a great thing to do. I still think these kind of movies play best with an audience.
Absolutely.
I mean, you really get, you get the laughter, everybody's laughing at the same things, and movies are a communal experience, and you just don't get the same impact when you're watching it on an iPad.
Yeah.
But it's still really good on an iPad.
Yeah.
So.
I'm a big believer in audiences, especially since we have a film festival here, the Sonoma International Film Festival, and I get to watch a lot of the movies in advance so that I can talk to the filmmakers. But one of the things that I love to do is I love to go see those same movies in the theater at the showing at the festival, because it's so much different when you get to see it with the audience around you. It's almost like a whole other movie.
Yeah, it's I've done that. I've seen movies that I've loved for years on DVD or Blu-ray and watch them over and over. And then they'll have a screening like down in Hollywood somewhere. I'll say, hey, this happened to us the other night. We went to see House of Wax at the Alex Theater in Glendale, and I can't believe how much fun I had watching it on the big screen because I was in the middle of the audience and everybody was having a great time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's a whole different thing.
And then I saw some CGI in the film. Did you try to stick with any of those old school B-movie special effects, or did you go for everything you had available to you?
There was there's some real blood effects. We had Jeff Farley, who's been doing horror films and creatures for years, created a shrew puppet for us that we used quite a bit in the film in a couple of sequences. And so we had that. The CGI was a necessity when we made the film. That was the big thing. We learned early on in the CGI process that when you're creating like a mega octopus shark combination that doesn't exist on the planet, it doesn't matter what it looks like or how it moves because nobody's ever seen it move before.
Right.
But if you're creating something that's similar to, let's say, a real animal like a wolf or a dog, like we were, it's much harder without a $100 or $200 million budget to get realistic movement. But at the end of the day, we figured we're doing a send-up here. We're doing a parody of these kind of movies anyway. So the fact that the CGI is less than adequate actually adds to the charm of the film. So
for sure.
That was kind of our thought.
Yeah. And your first feature as a director was called Vampire Trailer Park. So I'm suspecting you have some sort of love of B-horror movies just yourself.
Oh, yeah. I love them. Vampire Trailer Park is to this date, the only film I'm aware of about a bulimic vampire. So,
now I'm going to have to look that up.
It's hard to find. Actually, it's only been released in 2 countries. It was released in the UK and in Sweden. But I will be happy to fix you up with a copy if you really want to see it. It was actually the first feature film that Pat Moran and I did back in 1991. And
how cool.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would love to see that, so I'll email you later.
Please do.
Okay. And then let's give out some links. How can people... So it's on iTunes exclusively right now, so they can find it there for sure. What about trailers and information on the cast and good things like that?
You can go to... There's a Facebook page for Return of the Killer Shrews. There's also a website, which is killershrews.movie.com. And that can be seen there. There's trailers on YouTube. There's a music video on YouTube. And we post on the Facebook pages daily updates and things people can go to see. On the killershrews.movie.com site, there are links to behind-the-scenes stories that were filmed on the set. So there's all kinds of stuff out there.
Oh, how fun. You've been in the movie business for a few decades now. Do you find that interaction exciting? The ability to communicate with your audience and your fans on Facebook and other social media?
Oh, it's wonderful. There was a movie I made in 1995 called Jacko that became it's a Halloween film, and it became sort of a cult classic. And I've had, and the star of the movie was my son at the time, was 9 years old, and he's the star of the film. And decades later, I get messages on Facebook or emails from fans who were like 8 or 9 years old when they saw the movie, and now they're in their 30s, and they just love it. So those kind of interactions are wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome.
We've gotten so many on Jacko that we're actually in the process of doing a 25 years later sequel reboot to it.
Oh, great. How fun. So. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for calling in today. And listeners, we were talking with Steve Latshaw, the writer-director of Return of the Killer Shrews. So good luck with the film, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you, Kat. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.